Hi, I'm Dave Frary. In September 1999, I got a phone call from Bob Hayden in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He asked if I'd be interested in helping design and then build a display layout for the new Tenshodo retail shop in the Frary section of Tokyo Disneyland. A couple of weeks and a whole lot of emails and faxes later, the project begins to come into focus. Tenshodo, one of the oldest and most respected names in Japanese model railroading, is building a new store and wants a Western, U.S. theme HO display layout as its centerpiece. The store is in a prime location. It will be part of Frary, a European-themed shopping center at the Japanese National Railway's Miyahama Station. Miyahama is the station at Tokyo Disneyland where thousands of visitors detrain every day for a visit with Mickey and Goofy. Our partner in Japan will be John Olson. He was contacted by Disney executives to make the Tenshodo layout happen. He in turn contacted us. John is a vice president of Walt Disney Imagineering, the construction arm of the Disney Corporation. Walt Disney Imagineering is in Japan building the world's largest theme park right next to Tokyo Disneyland. The new theme park is called Tokyo Sea, and the new Tenshodo store will be next to Tokyo Sea and Tokyo Disneyland. Tenshodo had a big role in introducing HO scale model railroading to Japan. Still, it turns out that few people in Japan are familiar with HO trains, so an important objective of the Frary store is to show off an HO scale model railroad in an attractive setting. By November 1999, dozens of emails, faxes, and Federal Express packages had been exchanged, and the track plan was pretty much agreed upon. Bob has started work on a 1/6 scale, three-dimensional model of the proposed layout. The model railroad is to be based on U.S. practice with a Wild West look. Tenshodo wants plenty of action, and that means 3 continuous loops, one for mainline trains, one for branch line consists, and a logging operation on the summit. John Olson suggests that Bob and I come to Tokyo for meetings with the Tenshodo staff and the contractors to plan how the layout will be built. So on the day after New Year's, the year 2000, Bob and I meet at LAX and board a United flight for Narita Airport. 14 hours later, we cleared customs. Our meetings in Japan go well. We have to speak through an interpreter, which gives us lots of time to think about what we're saying and take notes while questions and answers are passed back and forth. The participants at the meeting include the Saibi Company, which will build the layout, the Tanshisha Corporation, the interior decorating firm for the store, and all of the Tenshodo staff members. In our meetings, we discuss the milestones for the project and who will do what. Bob will assemble, test, and weather the trains, and he'll design and build 4 bridges for the layout. My job is to build all the structures and assemble all the scenery materials. As the meetings progress, we find out that the layout has to be ready for public display by July 7th, 2000. That's when the grand opening of the Frary Shopping Center will take place. This date is exactly 6 months away. Needless to say, those 6 months go by quickly. Bob's first order of business was the bridges, while I tracked down the structure kits and the scenery supplies. By April, Bob had the bridges built and they were on their way to Japan for installation. Saibi needed the bridges before they started laying the track. The structures come next. Tenshodo favors old-style Campbell structures. I built 10 of them. and several Walthers and Grantline plastic structures. As soon as the buildings and structures were built and weathered, I boxed them for shipment and sent them to Japan. Meanwhile, Tenshodo chooses a name for the layout. They'll call it the Omega Central Railway. During the month of May, Bob assembles, paints, and weathers all of the rolling stock that Tenshodo has ordered. By the end of May, it's all shipped to Japan. Bob and I meet again in Los Angeles on June 1st. This trip will be 22 days long. We'll place the structures, finish the scenery on the layout, test and tune the trains, and then finish dressing the layout for the grand opening. We spend the first week and a half working at Saibi. There's a lot to do. Installing the structures, adjusting the colors of the urethane rocks, and adding texture and detail. Much to my relief, the Shinohara Code 83 track work runs perfectly thanks to Hatano-san, a local HO scale modeler. Hatano-san was hired to help with the track laying, wiring, and operation of the layout. We moved to the Ikspiari store midway through our second week. The shop is called Tenshodo HBF, and the HBF stands for Handmade Brass Factory. The shop is beautiful, and the setting for the layout is spectacular. The painters are putting the finishing touches on the backdrop when we arrive. A cove ceiling carries the sky all the way up over the layout, and it's painted in 2 layers. When the staff covers up the store windows and turns on the ultraviolet lighting, the sky changes from brilliant blue to a dramatic red and purple desert sunset. The layout will occupy a wedge-shaped space right in the middle of the Tenshodo store. The space is 7 feet deep and almost 16 feet across the back edge. There's also room for 3 or 4 staging tracks below and behind the scenery. While finishing the layout in the store, we get a lot of help. Saibi sends 4 of their best workers to help us finish with the painting and detailing. Hatano-san, as usual, is always busy making sure the track work is perfect and the trains run on it without a hitch. We spend the next week on finishing touches and running the trains to make sure they'll perform when the crowds arrive. Bob and Hatano fix clearance and coupler problems as they occur, and it's not long before we have the trains running continuously all day long. The scenery on the Omega Central has to be finished both in front where the visitors can see it and behind where they can't, because Tenshodo decided to install 6 small lipstick-sized color TV cameras so that visitors not only can see the trains when they run along the front of the layout, but with the aid of TV monitors placed around the store, can watch the trains when they're out of sight. As the week passes, Bob and I and the folks from Saibi continue to add more and more detail to the layout. We even put detail places where the visitors won't be able to see it, but the little TV cameras can. We run all the trains all day, every day, to make sure that they'll run flawlessly when the store opens. Meanwhile, Hatano-san spends a lot of time making little corrections to the track work, removing ballast from inside the rails, and taking out anything that causes the trains to wiggle or bump. I spend the last week painting all of the foreground details. This entails changing the coloring, dry brushing, weathering the rocks, and adding a lot of detail. Here I'm using a rock powder mixed with acrylic paint to get a permanent color that won't fade under the intense lights. I've also added some details to the rocks, which you'll see later. Meanwhile, Bob Hayden paints and weathers over 300 people, animals, and vehicles that will be placed on the layout. The final details are important. Here I'm adding a small piece of cellophane to a pipe that's sticking out through a stone wall. When I'm through, it'll look like water is falling out of the pipe. One of the finishing touches that I like to do is to paint the shadows in place. Here I'm adding a dark shadow underneath the bridge. Now the lights are mounted in the ceiling. They're permanently mounted and they'll probably never change. So by painting in the shadows, what I'm doing is creating a stronger illusion of light and dark, and I'm also creating a stronger illusion of texture on the rock surfaces. In the foreground, you'll see one of our Jurassic Park dinosaurs painted into the rock, and a team of archaeologists scaling down the cliff face to visit the bones. The hospitality in Japan was outstanding. John and Katie Olson let us stay at their home and taught us how to navigate the Japanese trains and subway system. The management of Tenshodo invited us to several wonderful dinners, as did Matsumoto-san and Harai-san of Train magazine. By July 22nd, right on schedule, the Amiga Central is complete. Tenshodo President Hideki Nomoto hosts a dinner for all the participants to celebrate. It's been 2 weeks, less than 6 months, since we first agreed on the schedule, and everything is ready to go for the grand opening on July 7th. On our last day in Japan, Bob and I dropped by the Ikspiari shop for one last look, then take the bus ride to Narita Airport for the long trip home. Along the way, we'll get back the day we lost on the trip over. Our progress building the Omega Central was documented in 2 issues of Train magazine. Train magazine is a Japanese model railroad magazine, which is similar to Model Railroader magazine in this country. Train magazine documented all of the steps in building, painting, and then detailing the Omega Central. July 8th, 2000. The Omega Central is ready for visitors. If you ever get to Tokyo, you should make time to visit Tokyo Disneyland, Tokyo Sea, Frary, and the Tenshodo train store.